Boris backstory. Boris grew up in a family full of violence. His father was an alcoholic, abusing domestic violence, which led to Boris's aggressive inclination. Having come of age, Boris became a notorious bully, joining gangs, brawling on the streets, abusing domestic violence, committing all kinds of crimes. At last, he was put in prison. But while he was in prison, his aggressive behavior still remained unchanged. He even became a prison bully. After getting discharged, Boris managed to become a jailer of the prison where he was in, continuing abusing violence against the prisoners to sate his own desire, either because the prisoners were his old minions or they were afraid of him. The ward under Boris's control was the quietest place across the entire prison. Soon enough, Boris got promoted to warden. Psychiatric assessment. Boris's appetitive aggression is far beyond my imagination. The resentment he built up in childhood cannot be removed. Psychiatric assessment. Boris's appetitive aggression is far beyond my imagination. The resentment he built up in childhood cannot be removed instantly. When he was in my office, he was still very excited, fidgeting all the time. Truth be told, I felt great pressure in front of such a strong, tall thug, worrying that I would piss him off by bringing up any impertinent subjects. I started the talk with his family. With a wave of his hands, Boris told me there was nothing to talk about. His father was an alcoholic, and his mother a weak woman, who knew nothing but to endure him and finally got herself killed. He said if he was his mother, he would do everything he can to put up for a fight, and he wouldn't stop until he succeeded. I'm quite sure that Boris's personality was shaped by his childhood trauma. The long-time resentment led to his inclination towards violence. There are only two options in his mind, fight or not. I'm quite sure that Boris's personality was shaped by his childhood trauma. The long-time resentment led to his inclination towards violence. There are only two options in his mind, fight or not. And then we talked about his work at the harbor prison. He proudly told me his ward was quietest across the prison. I asked him how he did it. Of course, by bloodying faces, he answered. Next, he shared his experience of controlling his prisoners with me excitedly. Although I agree that crimes cannot go unpunished, I still cannot approve of lynching. The most intolerable part is that Boris said, "Spare the rod, spoil the woman," when he talked about how he beat his wife blatantly in a proud tone. His behavior of domestic violence is unforgivable. Boris may be quite good at prison management, but I don't approve of his method nor his work. I think Boris needs mental treatment before returning to his post. Therapist Elsa Murphy.
Rosa backstory. Rosa was born in an Italian family. Her father was a policeman and her mother a doctor. Both of them were highly respected. Yet they died when Rosa was young. Rosa grew up in Angel Harbor 3rd District Orphanage. Having come of age, Rosa left the orphanage and began her study at Harvard Medical School, majored in genes and genetic diseases. In her second year of study, she joined the Massachusetts Gene Research Program and issued a large number of theses on genetic diseases in children. After graduation, Rosa refused a high salary offer from Harbor Medical Group and joined Bay Cop Hazard Response Team instead. Learning most of the welfare institutions lacking in medical professionals, she usually offers free help for the children in orphanages when she's free. She's a well-respected medical asset to the Bay Cop. A recommendation letter. Dear Mr. Khaled, hope this letter finds you and your family well. It's been 2 years since we last met. I'm so sorry that I couldn't pay you a visit in person because I'm still busy with my academic research. I'm afraid you must be buried in work too. This letter is to recommend my student Rosa to you. I've been her tutor for 2 years, and she is one of the most promising students I have ever taught. Admittedly, I cannot convince you with merely an academic reason, but Rosa is special. When we first met, she was still young, a little girl from the orphanage. My colleagues and I were dispatched to conduct a physical examination for the children there. It was already afternoon. when every one of us was exhausted that we still hadn't finished our work yet, but at that time, a little girl ran up to us, holding a dying bird. "Sir, he's wounded. Please help him." There were still many children waiting for the checkup, so my colleagues grew quite impatient and drove her away. At the thought of her sincere eyes, I felt guilty. We doctors should respect lives. How could we turn down a kid so coldly? After I finished my job, I found her in the yard. She was sitting beside a little pile of mud, on which stood a cross made of branches, praying for the bird. I picked a bunch of flowers to put on the grave, saying I was sorry that I couldn't help her. She told me her friends were just like that bird, abandoned, suffering from diseases, but there was nothing she could do. So, she wanted to become a doctor to help everyone. Deeply touched, I encouraged her. Several years later, I met her in the medical school. I was glad as well as surprised that she never forgot her childhood dream. During her study at school, she was devoted to all kinds of public welfare, helping numerous people. I advised her to stay for teaching and also recommended many high-salary jobs to her, but she refused them all. Given the current situation of Angel Harbor, she still chose to come back to help more people. That's why I wrote this letter. I know the harbor is an unpleasant place, but that's why we need an ambitious young soul to change it. Yours sincerely, Raphael Morgan, August 2nd, 2019.